the Multi Alliance that no matter how gloomy now it is, I do see the courage of my colleagues. I see someone, a companion that is running the course with me. And those energies can be very powerful. It can be more powerful than any mechanisms. Because all right, liberty and freedom, it has to be rooted by ourselves. It has to be fought by ourselves, not by some diplomat or a safer in Geneva. And collectively, um, we can achieve a collective aspiration to live as a free and
all of you has mentioned and highlighted our resilience as being contagious and can be an inspiration to each other. I think that's where a lot of the energy for the MICT Alliance coming from, and I think that's also why MICT Alliance in the past year has gained a lot of momentum as well, because as we sort of feed that energy, we want to keep it continue, because this is a positive energy that is giving us courage and hope for each of our struggle. So I have two more questions that are coming from the audience that I want to touch on, and I want to open up the space for the attendees to also, if you want, speak on what MICT Alliance means for you. You can just raise your hand, and then I can call on you to speak on that. So if you want to raise your hand now, you can start doing that, and I will jump on the questions for the panelists. One of the questions we have here is that is UN trying to intentionally avoid its responsibility by highlighting and depending so much on the ASEAN's role in Myanmar's crisis? And this is coming from one of our Burmese colleagues. Anyone could touch on this? Mark and Sana, do you want to talk on this question?
Yeah, I'm also wondering, even everybody knows that the ASEAN mechanism will not work, why they are still mentioning ASEAN and giving the role to ASEAN. And yeah, at that time, I also asking myself, and I would like to ask to the other too. I don't have answer for that. Yeah, thank you.
Yes, I also just wanted to jump in. I also feel the same way, because sort of something like they're just throwing the ball around to who is responsible, so that none of them have to take responsibility. So that's kind of how I feel as a Burmese citizen, and watching these organizations just release statement and not really doing anything substantial or concrete. And the next question is on ASEAN as well, is asking if whether we think do you think ASEANs will engage with the NUG immediately to end the mass killing and help restore democracy and peace in Myanmar? What is that? I think we have touched on our opinions in ASEAN inviting the junta, but if we think that, is there any hope for ASEAN to engage with the NUG? Somebody can answer.
I think Mark would like to
Yeah.
have some comment about it.
Yes, I will put Mark. Mark, if you want to answer.
Yeah, sure. Actually, I wanted to add as well to the question on pitting UN versus ASEAN, because I think this is a trap, especially for our governments here in ASEAN. They would say that, they would tell the UN that you should, you are intervening. The West is intervening, but at the same time, they will not step up. International diplomacy, international relations is about norm creation, but how they interpret the non-interference principle is a way that, it's a race to the bottom. I'll scratch your back if you scratch mine. So they are not actually sincere in developing a norm, in holding each other accountable. So right now, I think we need to call the bluff of ASEAN. You do not want, you always say that allow us to develop our ASEAN way so that we will become mature. But at some point in the history of ASEAN did it really become sincere to actually push the envelope? Norm creation is about pushing the envelope, holding each other into account for principles set in the ASEAN Charter. Human rights is in there, you know. And so I think we need to call the bluff. The question is wrong. I think pitting UN versus ASEAN, we need to develop an international community built on solidarity, on principles of human rights, um, and justice in different levels, in the national, in regional, and in the international. And each level checks on each other. So it's not about pitting on each other, at building that multi-level of community. But on whether what do we expect on Saturday on the ASEAN Emergency Summit, to be honest, based from history, based from how the ASEAN conducted itself, and also based on its extension of the invitation to the junta to participate, we already know what's going to happen. Of course, we will be opening our minds, to and hear them out. But at the same time, we are also naive. I don't think the young people here who have led, participated, facilitated movements, and even engaged, haven't isolated ourselves from our governments. We've done that critical engagement. We are not naive that that the meeting on uh, Saturday would still be the same. What we put here in our open letter weeks back is the minimums. It's a test, really, a litmus test. If ASEAN is really sincere, you could always do that. You could always, for example, um, suspend the membership of Myanmar until the time that the national unity government is reinstalled, because otherwise you are interfering. But if UN and the ASEAN will not do its part, I think we are here, the Milk Tea Alliance. We are have how many, at least for this pocket of Milk Tea Alliance, we've been gathering regularly. Not just memes, but even sounding board, sending resources to each other, learnings, planning, sharing tactics for now. How many weeks now? I think it's already 12 14 weeks in total since the first week of the coup. Since we are asking, looking for each other, could you reach out to the Milk Tea Alliance? And we were asking, who is the Milk Tea Alliance? Am I the Milk Tea Alliance? But at some point, we step out and said that they are referring to us. We participated in the memes, in the Thai BL memes last year, and we are also doing in person press. So if we have no pretensions that the Saturday meeting will be same, but at least by stepping up and doing this open letter and challenge them to do this, if they do not do that, they are exposing themselves to be not really for the principles that they set themselves to in the ASEAN charter. But otherwise, the Milk Tea Alliance will shape the the ASEAN that you aspire for, that's built in actual solidarity, in sisterhood, as Safina said, in sisterhood. um we will build that ASEAN that that our leaders and our elders were not able, and our elites were not able to build for us.
Mark, thank you so much for such a powerful response on Milk Tea Alliance. Can you also introduce yourself as well, because you jump in to answer your question?
I'm Mark. Mark Batak. I'm from the Philippines. I've been doing a lot of organizing as well, many hats, an NGO worker, but as beyond formal representations, I have participated in many informal organizing in the past. So couldn't also box myself in one identity, but really just also a citizen of Southeast Asia, and also beyond Southeast Asia.
There's another question that came up in the chat. The question said that there is the way to influence. He has held that the way to influence ASEAN is to intervene soon or soon, or as country outside of ASEAN will do it. This was in relation to Myanmar's earlier transition. But do you think it is still applicable now? Do you think that statement that to influence ASEAN is to say that, oh, if you don't, other countries will step in. Mark, do you want to answer this question since you're the new star of our show?
Sorry. The question specifically was about. Can you repeat the question?
So the question specifically was about whether they have heard that the way to influence ASEAN is to say to ASEAN that if you don't, other countries saying to ASEAN that if you don't intervene now, the other countries will intervene. Do you think that's a statement that is applicable to current situation in Myanmar?
I think first one, it's not intervention. I think first one, what's happening across our borders is our issue. We've seen, for example, wherein human rights abuses and impunity in one geographic area has allowed different elites as well, governments to take, to learn and be emboldened to do the same and repeat that. Many of the what happened, for example, in the Philippines using the tax laws to close down media, they've learned from Cambodia, which Cambodia learned from Singapore. So what's happening in there is happening for us. But at the same time, I think the concept of our borders is so archaic. At least in Southeast Asia, we know that it has also been imposed to us by our colonizers. Why is, for example, uh, Myanmar and Thailand, divided that way? And that is the point of the international community as well, right? I think we are going beyond that. There are many issues that is intertwined. There are causes and effects